Welcome back to another episode of MBA Mike. On this episode, which might be unfortunately my final episode, I'm going to be interviewing Daniil Shcherbakov. Daniil, do you want to give a quick introduction to yourself?
Hey you guys, my name is Daniil Shcherbakov and thank you so much Rosin for inviting me. I already showed you a heart, but I will show a heart to camera right now for you, all of the viewers. I'm more than sure there will be more than one, at least my family and my wife. But anyway, my point is, so yes, I'm actually somehow the only one Russian here this year. But like speaking of my background, I actually spent all of my career in the tech startups, being responsible for launching them abroad from scratch. I have tons of sparkling failures and some moderate successes. For instance, I was responsible for creating, manufacturing, and launching international sales of mobile virtual reality headset Vibram Pro, and we ended up selling over 50,000 units worldwide and made the product available in Walmart, Best Buy, Amazon, MediaMarkt Saturn in Germany, and AliExpress in China. And I think the last piece I would like to mention that I love to coach and actually to help startups in their journey abroad. So I constantly do masterclasses and workshops on customer interviews, on how to pitch, how to fundraise and all of that stuff, because I see my job as like a very tiny brick in actually trying to make more Eastern European startups successful abroad.
Yeah, and Daniil, what would you say were your key learnings from this startup journey that you've had so far?
Oh, that's actually a great question. If you ask me personally, I think that you should be absolutely okay with your failures because it is an inevitable part of the learning journey. And I think this sounds so natural in the Western cultures, but like in Russia, in my home country, if you fail, the society will actually point at you and saying that you are a loser and probably you should never start anything ever again. So like such a simple thing for me, it was like a breakthrough to understand that fail is absolutely okay and what is more important, to fail fast. The other thing that I think that you should launch the product on the market as fast and as soon as possible. What I mean by that? If you are not embarrassed by your first version, probably you launched it too late. And I think the very last, but probably the most important piece is the team, because it is the people that make any product stand out, not the product itself. And I think I'm already gave a lot of advices, but I think the last advice that I read recently, and I think it's brilliant, it was made by the founder of the Twitch, Justin, because Twitch was Justin TV before, and he said that the first time founders always focus on the product, while the second time founders are always always focused on actually distribution channels. And I think this is very important because it is not that important to create a product, and it's not that hard, to be honest, but to be able to distribute it and to be able to scale the sales, this is what make you into success.
Yeah, and Daniil, I read your blog from 5 years ago where you mentioned your key learnings from startups are to, don't be afraid of mistakes, as you just said, love to learn the process, be honest with others and yourself, learn to look at yourself, self-reflect, and maintain a sense of humor and self-irony. Has anything changed from that, or do you have any new additions to that list? Or it's been 5 years since you published that. Sounds like you still resonate with it, but any changes?
More or less, I still think that it accurately describes my entrepreneurial and even life approach, I suppose. I think what was just missing is other people. And I think people should be probably even on the top of that. But other than that, I think this is my life motto, probably, to try to keep my a child in myself as long as possible. So be curious, be prepared for adventures, try to see always good in the people, don't be a douchebag. So I think this is all of the components that makes me, and also I think that makes a good entrepreneur really great. But I do not consider myself a great entrepreneur. I never had an exit, at least so far. But I'm not giving up, because according to the statistics, the average age of the founder, sounds like an excuse, but it is not, but still, an average age of the founder of the unicorn in Silicon Valley is 42. So I got 12 years ahead.
12, okay, I thought 20.
I'm not that young.
What are your favorite parts of the startup world?
You mean like a part of in creating a company, like or like what kind of part?
The favorite part of being part of a startup compared to let's say a typical job.
Well, for me, I think
one.
it is unlimited responsibilities, definitely. You know, it is such a great thing that you are able, especially being experienced business development manager, like growth manager, you could do whatever you want to, and you are in fact only in charge what the next step would be. While in big corporation, you will be surrounded by great people, no doubts about it, especially in tech. But your responsibilities would be extremely limited, and no matter whether you are, let's say, a professional in other field, nobody will care about it. So like what I love about the startups is that you are in charge of your life. And I think startup allows you to answer yourself honestly that like, I did what I could, it didn't work out, but like at least I did my best. While let's say in the big corporations, there are so many middlemen in, let's say, launching a product or whatever, that it is so easy to start blaming others, and I think this is the worst thing that could happen. I always try to understand what I did wrong, and I think like in general, do what I could do and then hope for the best is also a thing that characterizes my life approach very much.
Yeah, and talking about mistakes that founders tend to make when they're raising money specifically, what are the number one mistakes that you have found? Because I know you've been involved in raising money for other firms.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So like I've been involved in raising to date 7.5 million for different startups that I helped into it. I think the main mistake is that they do not take it so seriously. And also probably they also think that fundraising is some sort of a low-hanging fruit. That let's say with a cool product, you could fundraise instantly, which is not, despite how cool your product is. I think what they do, like what people do not understand, especially in the early stages, like pre-seed and seed stage, and probably sometimes even Series A, how important the team is. Because like, you know, I read in a blog of Techstars, probably one of the most famous accelerators, and they actually have also a great free, by the way, online course on venture financing. It's brilliant, but it's not a promotion, by the way, but like it's free. My point is, the way how they select startups into their accelerator, they got 5 criteria in a descending order. First team, second team, third team, fourth it is a product, and then fourth it is a market, and fifth it is a product. And I think this is a great example of how much team really matters and how much product itself doesn't matter, because the pivots happened every time, and so this like it's absolutely natural. Remember that Instagram was created as a competitor of Foursquare in the early days, and like there are so many other examples into that. So like understand that it is a process, and also like, you know, in Russia there is a phrase, I'm not sure how it is appropriate right now, but why not? It's not like sexist or something, but that 9 pregnant women are not able to give birth in 1 month. So the idea of that phrase that every process has a duration. So speaking of fundraising process, it will take you on average from 6 to 9 months to fundraise, and don't try to hack it. This is how the world works, and simply you need to get familiar with the people and so on and so on. So like, and like, I think that it is kind of longer answer that you expect, but like fundraise, it's like a world in a world itself. So like it's you could run tons of lectures in it, but probably my first thing, and it actually relates to my, let's say, life, I don't know, motto, so whatever that you just mentioned, that fail fast and iterate. And it is absolutely okay, by the way, to like fail your first pitches with investors. What is very bad that you won't learn from them. So like try fast and just always ask for the feedback and improve, and then eventually you will fundraise. Because like I know like some people who did, I'm not joking, like 400 pitches within like 2 or 3 months time frame, which means like several pitches a day, which is like unheard of, but this is possible in Valley, and they fundraise. So like just like do it, reflect, ask for interview, for references, ask for feedback, and people will see it. Because like you should understand that when startups fundraise, investors look at them not in a static. they look them in the movement. And for instance, when the investors give a feedback to a startup, and you actually implement this feedback and you get them back to me, they will evaluate you as a professional and your team as a professionals, because you're able to admit feedback, and they will see you as a mature entrepreneur. And this is also very, very important.
Daniil, we have often heard throughout the MBA that the number one reason for startups to fail is people-related problems. But what specific problems have you found that are the people-related problems that founders can avoid?
First of all, I think that success of each startup is absolutely unique and unrepeatable. That's why, for instance, I'm not reading any books on Netflix success, Pixar success, and so on, because it is unrepeatable. What you just mentioned is absolutely right. What we can avoid are the mistakes, because most of the time people reinventing the wheel and in fact stepping on the same, let's say, troubles that tens of thousands entrepreneurs stepped before. So if you ask me, probably the main problem in terms of the teams, first of all, when you create businesses, let's say, with friends. I'm not, by the way, saying that it is impossible to create a good and thriving business with friends. It's a numbers game. It's a statistic game. So, for instance, when you become friends and close to each other after starting a business, that is absolutely natural. But let's say when you first become very best friends and then become a business, that could be a real problem. And once again, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying that it is always a problem, but I have seen such kind of dramas in my life before with the founders that I have been worked with. So this is sometimes what happened. Also, when you haven't decided on your responsibilities as a founders beforehand. And I think 2 founders is the most common number of founders in general. There are some solo founders, but I think in general investors view more than 3 founders as a weak point of the startup, because you will never be able to lead into the agreement. So I think this is also very important to divide the responsibilities from the beginning, to understand what brings to the what each person brings to the table, and also being aware that as a CEO probably you have to step down at some point, because you simply no longer be competent, or you should always be willing to learn. Recently we have a great conversation in the class with one of the venture capitalists, and what he said, he's kind of successful, and what he said is guys, I'm good at 0 to 1 and sometimes from 1 to 10, but then I suck from 10 to 100, and I don't do it. I got partners who help our startups to bridge this gap from 10 to 100. And just focus on what you're good at and don't be shy about it. I think if you ask me personally, it is impossible to be good in everything. And all of this rule of 10,000 hours, it's not always applicable. I think it is better to become great in what you're good at, other than trying to become mediocre in what you're not so good at. And back into team. Things. So what else is very important to understand, that you should always hire as a founder the people that are better than you. And sometimes it is very hard to put your ego aside and to admit that you're not aware of everything, and you should share the responsibilities with the people who are more competent. And this is kind of hard from time to time. What else? I think I could keep going and going, but let me come up with, let's say, another idea of what will be important. I think have a good climate in the company, and also have a cultural fit interview as a part of hiring process. Because if you ask me personally, even if you found a great professional, but it does not culturally fit with your company, you're gonna regret hiring him. And probably the last thing, I have already said last thing numerous of times, but the very last thing, hire long, fire fast. So this is, and I think it is done in
hire long.
Yeah, I mean the duration of, let's say, peak candidates for a long time. Mm-hmm. So don't, let's say, if you find someone who is okay-ish, don't go this road. Mm-hmm. Find the one that you're really into. But when you understood that the person, let's say, is not competent, give him one chance to fix the things. But if he won't, don't actually believe that the people gonna change. Unfortunately, when you are a grown-up man, you won't change. So just fire the person fast.
Yeah.
I think that sounds very cynical, but I'm coming from a cynical country. So what do you expect from me?
No, it sounds very reasonable if I'm completely honest. I've had experiences of working with co-founders that have resulted in difficulties, and usually those co-founder related difficulties do not get resolved because, people are adults and they're a certain way because they're that way. And, that's not usually not even a negative point. It just means that they might not be suited to that environment that you have created. Another question is, there are a lot of people who want to join a startup or, think it's cool to work in a startup, and they're probably really good at doing that if they had the opportunity. The difference is they either don't have the capital, they don't have the other co-founders, or they don't have an idea. So what ways do you think an MBA student, for example, might go about finding a startup that somebody else has started that they find exciting and join that? How would that process be for that person?
So first of all, here comes a controversial quote from me. I think if you would like to found a company, you shouldn't go to the MBA. Like really, I think if you will invest 100k that we invested like dollars in the MBA into a startup and then eventually fail, because it is inevitable, especially first time, you will get more in terms of learnings, network, and so on than if you invest in the MBA. And MBA is not a bad thing, but I think, for instance, like my goal of getting an MBA was to better understand how to, let's say, go from 10 to 100, all of these business processes and so on. But like I was an entrepreneur before, and I think I'm still an entrepreneur, so like it helped me. But like MBA is not a holy grail at all. So like if you ask me personally, it is what like you should do in this case. And then actually speaking, and by the way, this is how I feel about it. As much as consulting and FAANG companies like Google and so on, I think being an entrepreneur is a very hyped thing right now, like in general. And people think it is cool, you're gonna sit in a co-working, drink smoothies and like all of that stuff, you're gonna have a posh life because like you're gonna be next Zuckerberg or whatever, but in fact it's not. It doesn't mean that it is miserable to be a founder, no, but like, it's like Instagram, when you have all of the fancy life, like of your people whom you know from school and you have a FOMO, but in fact they live a miserable life simply because like, they simply put the best pictures on the Instagram. And this is more or less the life of the founder. So if you feel yourself not ready to be founder, after MBA, before an MBA, this is absolutely normal. You should be always you. So if you would like to better understand how a startup world works and you have, let's say, professional experience, I would suggest you to go to a scale up other than to a seed startup, because let's say you will get capital to act on, and also I think the business processes will be a bit more organized and less chaotic than in a very early stage startup. So like going to a scale up, it is very important. Even at present, in many job descriptions, they literally say that they are looking for people who have startup experience in a scale ups, and they make it for a reason, because a hyper growth stage is also a unique stage. If you ask me personally, probably I love more the zero, like ground zero stage, when you have nothing and you create something from it. But it doesn't mean that, let's say, it is my preference, and as I told you, like everyone should probably look for something for themselves and not looking for easy answers for tough questions, because this is the worst thing to do. So like join a scale up where where your skills will be in a great demand, and try it. Like, try. If you don't like it, it's easier to left a startup, and also it is posh to explain to recruiters that you tried a startup and blah blah blah. So like you won't regret it anyway, but you will get a sense, because I know so many people, not like so many, but kind of a few, who joined the startup from the being corporate and won't be able to work in there because everything was so chaotic. So like I love when it is chaotic. I'm such a goofball in general, so like I'm also a chaotic person, and like I feel myself natural in that, but like I feel myself natural, and it doesn't mean that other people will do so. So like be yourself. I think this is like very important, that it is so hard to like understand, and like to my surprise, like it is even sometimes so hard to be confident in your actions. Like, but there is no right or wrong. Like you being you is the most important and crucial asset that you have.
Yeah, you touched on a really good point there, where the early stage of the company, where the company is going from a zero to, for instance, 100 customers, is very different of a journey from it growing from 100 to, 100,000 customers. But from your personal experience, since you are interested in that early stage, how do you personally feel founders should go about getting those 100 clients, because they're probably going to be very different from these the rest of the curve. These early adopters or innovators are typically there for in those categories for a reason. So how does a co-founder or founder go about attracting those customers in a business?
Well, it's a great question, to be honest. And the biggest problem, I think, with entrepreneurship is that it is not math or physics. So there are no like formulas that are always work. But like in general, this is how it was. I suppose to think that founder should be responsible for three main things. The first one is fundraising, and it is actually some sort of a full-time job. The second one is actually product, and the third one is actually sales. And here we come in a, let's say, blurred, like vague field. What I mean by that? It is inevitable that the founder will do sales in the beginning. But the biggest problem is when the sales happening because of the founder. And this is a problem because you will face a scaling problem in the future. And I think the product, it also depends on the industry, by the way, because like for B2B enterprise sales, it is okay and you will have capital to cover bad AL salesperson. But for instance, in a small and medium business, or let's say in a B2C startups, if it is the founder who makes the sales, you are in a bad position. You are in trouble, literally. Because for those products, what exemplifies an ability to scale when a very mediocre salesman is able to sell your product without much effort because the customers see value in that. So I think this is also very important. And like there are also like lots of tiny things that are important. Like for instance, you shouldn't like adapt your product to each of the consumer because you will end up with a very strange product which is not profitable. And also you should probably be able to understand that, for instance, if your product sucks, but people still use it, it means that they see value in it. And this is also very important. And like I think all of the things that I'm saying right now is an obvious truth. But this is, I think, the bad thing and the good thing at the very same time in the startups, because the easiest things are the harder things to implement. So like it's easy to get this like advice that I'm giving right now to the audience, but you couldn't even imagine how hard it is to implement and to stay aware that you shouldn't reinvent the wheel and like think about this stuff. And like here is a real life example. So like I was responsible for launching Radario marketing platform, which allows event organizers to boost their ticket sales via targeted advertisement for their current audience. And the issues that we faced, and I think this is like to a huge degree my mistake, that we were able to get like 100 or like somewhere above it paying clients, but we wasn't able to scale to tens, like to thousands or tens of thousands, because the market was kind of tiny and the unit economics wasn't positive. And to be fair with you, at present with my experience, I most likely aware that I will be able to spot this problem beforehand, and probably it will save us money. But the thing is, you will know what will happen until you try, because some other great things might happen, like and so on and so on. But still, like being aware of those like scalability issues, I think it's also very important. So like, if you do your first sale, it's lovely. You feel like you're gonna do tons of them and so on. But keep in mind that it should be scalable. And also, for instance, if you think that your customers comes for free because of the network effect or whatsoever, always be aware that each marketing channel has its limit. And in addition, and this is also important, a very important, I think, investors' advice, that it is cool that your customers come to your product for free, but show the investors that you already found at least one or two paid marketing channels to attract for user acquisition, because it will show the investors that you are aware of that marketing channel could, let's say, drain, and this is absolutely normal, and it will show that you are mature as an entrepreneur, that you are aware of those things.
Yeah, that sounds very scientific, to be honest, or what science should have been like in the real world, but it's probably the startup world that's actually implementing the build, measure, learn method, that 0 to 1.